Now, I usually never make these kind of videos, and I actually didn't want to make any drama-based videos on Dune Awakening, but the recent update they pushed on July the 7th has caused me to do so, because I feel like this is a major step in a bad direction. Now, I quickly want to discuss the topic of this video at hand, and that is the fact that when they pushed an update to live on July the 7th, which was supposed to be some decent bug fixes and changes, it ended up moving control points in the deep desert to literally be in PvP. So there were PvE bases before the update in the deep desert that upon post-update then became flagged. Now, this is really bad, as you might guess. Some people had a lot of valuable stuff there. Carriers, crawlers, melange, plastanium, etc. all in the PvE deep desert. Now, susceptible to raiding and PvP, and ultimately that's exactly what happened, right? In fact, even my guild went around and looked at the damage. Bases were getting destroyed everywhere. We went to the location, the biggest location of impact, which was the sector D6, and in the very top left there is a rock or a node formation that on most servers, at least based on my server, had around 20 bases at it. There was also another cluster in D2 that got affected by this control point shift, and ultimately, again, this flagged that whole region for PvP. This meant those bases could be raided, and again, they did. They lost all their mats, their hard-earned progress, their carriers, etc. And there, most importantly, has been no word of a rollback or any compensation from Funcom, and even I screenshotted this because I wanted to bring it into the video here. I felt it was extremely important that this was showcased. So, Iggy, who is a community manager at Funcom in the official Discord, said, "Is there any plan of returning things lost at D6?" So this was, PvE players or even PvP players that had a safety base or a base that was safe in the PvE zone become flagged for PvP, become vulnerable to raiding due to these sudden control point shifts in the middle of a deep desert Coriolis storm. In fact, this was before the Coriolis storm. In fact, there's even a website that we can use to track when the next Coriolis storm hits. I'll leave this in the description if you want to track your Coriolis storm updates. But for Europe, South America, and North America, it is still 10 hours at the point of this recording, 10 hours away from the actual Coriolis storm peaks when the deep desert changes, which is, in my opinion, still more than enough time to mess around in the deep desert. And generally the rule is, this has always been my rule, is I pack up around the 8 to 10 hour mark. So most people will be starting to pack up now. The problem is, this is around 10 hours after the incident. In fact, it might even be a little bit more than that, but yeah, it's around, let me just do some quick math there, 9, so it's about 9 to 10 hours since the impact, right? Since the patch went live. At the time of recording, it has been around 10 hours. It is 6:49 AM for me. The patch in the bottom right here, the patch for me went live around 9 PM. So taking that into consideration, around about 9 hours and 49 minutes since everything went down. That means since then, there's been a bunch of progress to the servers in general, so that kind of leaves a rollback out of the equation. Now, again, I want to preface that a lot of stuff was lost. Now, I did do some basic math, some basic trend math here that I will share with you guys because I feel like it is important to mention. So, I would estimate the bases per server located at D6 and D2 clusters, the rock clusters there, where a lot of people built PvE bases prior to the update, are around 20 per server. This is based on my own server. I'll show some footage of us going to D6 to check the destruction, and I would guesstimate around, there were maybe 12 bases at this cluster, and maybe 6 bases at the D2 cluster. So on average, 18 to 20 bases per clusters on each server. Now, there is around 192 servers in the game in total. Now, I might have miscounted there, as I did have to individually count them all, which is kind of annoying, based on the server status website on dune.gaming.tools. Now, let's say that each base or each cluster, each base at the clusters was around a group of 4 players maintaining them. So out of those 20 bases, there were 4 players that were doing progress in them, crafting, storing stuff, etc. This is being very generous, as we're not going to count guilds because we don't know how many guilds there could have been at each cluster. So this is taking a lower end guesstimate or lower end trend on how many players were affected. So I did some simple maths here based on averages and trends. Again, the average bases based on my server, the total servers, which is an accurate number, and the amount of players, which is more of a guesstimate based on trends in the game. So 20 times 192 servers, this gives us 3,840 bases affected, potentially higher, might be lower. I think it is very lowball here. I think much more bases have been affected. And there's more than 1 million players in this game, I think. So it's easy to, I think, at least from my perspective, say that this is the amount of players affected. Now we can times 3,840 bases by 4 players. As we said, we'll align a group of 4 players to each base, and that gives us around 15,000 players, or 15,360. And I think that is on the lower end of players affected. So on a minimum, at a very low ball, 15,000 players were affected because of this random update change to the control points, which is again a guesstimate backed up by trends. But I think this is very much on the low end, and the numbers are much higher. Even removing the theoretical count of players that were affected because of this head-ass developer change, it sets expectations. Most importantly, it removes all trust going forward with Funcom for its players. I have lost a lot of trust. I do not know what to expect in future updates now and what else they will break. And most importantly, there have been other ongoing bugs and major issues with the game. For example, since the patch on July 2nd, there has been an inventory disappearing bug, and a lot of you might have even been affected by that. If you're doing logistics, you're taking your deep desert base down and exporting resources back to your Haga base, you might notice that, maybe, hopefully not, you have been affected by a inventory disappearing bug, and my guild's had that happen to a few players. I know a bunch of other guilds that have also had their inventories just completely disappear. Now, I've heard the developers say that this is just a case of the items are still there, but they're invisible, and you should simply relog and log in for them to reappear. The problem is that doesn't happen. In fact, I completely disagree with them saying this as a way to circumvent how serious this problem is, as these items are actually being deleted if the player doesn't know about it, because they might be taking their storage module off, etc., which would in theory drop those invisible items on the ground, and they don't know those invisible items are even there. So fundamentally, this is pretty game breaking. Next up, there has also been a server disconnected bug since July the 2nd patch as well, where people simply cannot play the game. Their characters enter a corrupted state, and they cannot play on their main characters. They can create second characters on different servers and play those completely fine. But when it comes to playing their main character, they cannot play it. They log in and constantly get disconnected and effectively have their character in a corrupted state. I know a few people that have had this happen to them, including a fellow streamer on Twitch, and it is a pretty awful bug where they simply cannot play the game. And this has been going on for 4+ days, where a multitude of people literally can't even play the game. It's rendered unplayable. This is a very bad bug alongside this PvE to PvP zone base change, and of course, these things stacking on top of each other presents a multitude of issues with the recent patches, breaking the trust, breaking any kind of respect that the players have for Funcom and developing the game. Knowing the history of the developers of Funcom with Conan Exiles, this is pretty much going to be expected going forward, and I genuinely believe unless we see back-to-back patches without game-breaking bugs, then I would not recommend the game in its current state. I would change your positive reviews, if you have one, to negative. In fact, I have changed my own review, and I will go and locate that and show you what I changed my review to and actually talk about it. I had a positive review for this game, originally, but I changed that after these recent 2 patches have broken the game, alongside issues that have prolonged since launch day and even since the open beta and closed beta tests. So, if you don't know, there has been a massive duplication problem and exploit problem in Dune Awakening. People have been able to easily duplicate items, and it goes unnoticed, unchecked, untracked, untraced, and unbannable because the developers do not even have the systems in place to do it. I've actually talked to an exploiter. I don't want to share his voice recordings because I want to keep his privacy. That's what he requested of me, and I'm going to respect that and value that. But he basically said that he has been duplicating since launch and has not lost anything. He's never been banned. So he has been duplicating items for over 30 days, for over a month since June 5th, and hasn't faced any consequences. So it's clear to me the developers have no kind of system in place to track stuff, to detect stuff, and most importantly, ban players that create serious offenses, breaking the in-game and the economy of a supposed PvP, PvE in-game experience. And this is also on the topic of cheating, is that is another serious topic. If you didn't know, Dune Awakening has a massive hacking problem. Not only are there your typical aimbots, ESPs and whatnot, but there are proper rage hacks in this game that go unchecked and unbanned. These cheats can range from changing vehicle and base permissions to literally hijack your stuff and your progression, insta-killing across the map. Yes, they can literally find your name and kill you across the map, even if you're in a PvE zone. And they can also, on top of everything, have speed hacks, which completely ruins the dynamic of the deep desert and means you aren't safe anywhere. There's also, again, a solid 50-50 chance of your goodies saying bye-bye when you cross a server map. For example, going from Haga Basin to Deep Desert or vice versa, there's a 50-50 chance you could just lose your whole storage module and everything in it. If you have any melange or plastanium taken back from the Deep Desert that week, there's a high chance you could lose it all. And quickly backtracking onto the topic of hackers, they don't get banned. They can TP vehicles as well. And the anti-cheat fundamentally sucks. The developers are not banning cheaters. I also know a couple cheaters and have spoken to a couple cheaters from other servers that I don't play on, thankfully. My server has been pretty pure. But other servers that have literally been hacking since day one and have gone unchecked and unbanned. These are people using hardcore rage hacking cheats that inject into the game. I'm not kidding when I say this. This game has a lot of flaws, and part of that is caused by Unreal Engine. If you don't know, Unreal Engine is one of the most popular AAA engines, even AA engines in the current day, and it is purely because it is much cheaper to invest development into. And it's actually a great engine, and I do want to preface that it is a great engine, but it comes with a lot of downsides. Unreal Engine is free. This means a hacker can easily find its vulnerabilities, especially with games made on Unreal Engine, to exploit them. This is why you see cheats on Unreal Engine games pop up like candy, because it is an extremely hackable engine. And that is one of the big problems with Dune Awakening and its other issues. Not only has Funcom used a lot of its code base from Conan. If you didn't know, Conan Exiles was Funcom's previous game they made that was also built on Unreal Engine 4, I believe, has a big code base that had partial systems repurposed and put into Dune Awakening. Now, there's actually nothing wrong with reusing code bases. That's pretty common in the AAA industry. You look at Call of Duty, they're still using code bases and, code from probably 10 titles ago because they can, and it shortcuts that development time, saves them costs, and it's more efficient. And if it works, it works. The problem in Funcom's case is their code base from their previous game, Conan Exiles, is extremely exploited like a plate of spaghetti, right? It is spaghetti code fundamentally, and they're just adding on top of it and putting bandages and hot fixes on top of problems instead of actually fixing and changing the core code. And this is also very prevalent currently with Dune Awakening, where there are literally just band-aid fixes on band-aid fixes for things like duplication exploits. The devs said they have fixed the duplication exploits in one patch. There's still apparently over 20 different duplication exploits, and they will probably never be fixed, just like they were never fixed in Conan Exiles, because that game also has its own exploits that are still around years and years later. So that leads on to the other thing of why Conan Exiles purely thrives off private servers and private server communities and admins, is they have the tools to keep their servers clean. In a game like Dune Awakening, you technically have 0 proper private servers. You have a private Haga basin, but beyond that, in the deep desert, if you want to explore the pinnacle of the content, the end of the content, the end game, as it's called, you literally have to run that risk of playing on official servers, which are super exploitable. So no matter what you do, you cannot avoid how flawed systems are in this game. Now, I'm not making this video to completely shit on Dune Awakening. I love this game, and it has got great foundations. In fact, I have 305 hours, which is a clear example of why and a reason why I love this game, right? It is fundamentally a fantastic game with amazing foundations to be built on for future updates. But that goes without saying that that doesn't mean it exempts the problems. And this game has a lot of fires, especially at the in-game level. Now, I've heard some people say, again, that there's only 25% of people that have entered the deep desert. I believe this game sold 1 million copies. I think they came out and said it sold 1 million copies. So if we say 25% of people enter the deep desert and 1 million copies sold, that means 250,000 people have entered the deep desert. And again, using my average maths here, 15,000 players were affected by the recent, decision Funcom decided to make by changing control points mid-Deep Desert cycle, or sort of a day before Deep Desert cycle changed, which caused a massive outrage and a massive problem to be created for the developers. I don't know how they're going to go about this. I also don't know how they're going to build up their trust ever again, especially if you've never played Conan Exiles like me, but have heard about their issues. I now want to lean more towards never playing a Funcom game ever again, but I'm going to stick with Dune Awakening for a little bit longer, again, as it is my content currently, but that doesn't mean I will respect the developers. I have no respect for them until they fix their shit. Truthfully, I had a lot of hopes going into this game. I also wanted to finally have a game where there was no drama and no bullshit surrounding it. If you know me, I came from New World, and I played New World religiously. I have over 6,000 hours on the game. It's where I built my community. I'm thankful for you guys that are still sticking around from that game, but that game is following the exact, this game, Dune Awakening, is following the exact same path the exact same path New World had. And if you don't know, New World had a bunch of duplication exploits, bugs, and vulnerabilities at launch, just like Dune Awakening is showing right now. And that is what I'm scared of. I do worry that we will end up in the exact same situation where we will lose a lot of the player base and it will become a niche game. Now, I'm hoping that the Dune IP does hold that up for a little bit longer, as it is a known, IP, but there's only so much a game can thrive off the world rather than the gameplay itself. As that is, in my opinion, the most important thing. If the game doesn't play well, it's not a video game, right? It's like saying the new Star Wars movies are good, and it's same kind of dynamic, right? It's Star Wars, but it's not good Star Wars. So this is a very big problem. I don't know what the developers are going to do about it. I just want to tack on a few more things in this video, including going back to my review. I said that at the very end of it, that we have not had a dev live stream since before June 5th, the release, or the advanced access release of the game. I don't really know why the developers have cut their communication to very limited amounts. It's kind of weird in that sense. Generally, when you just drop a game, you want to keep people as interested as long as possible, and also, keep them hooked on what's next. But these developers, especially Funcom, they always talk about this vision, this big vision they have for the game, but we have no idea what that vision is. Other than a small amount of details through the Season Pass page on Steam, we don't know what to expect coming to the game. We don't know what they plan to change the Deep Desert to make it better. And the PvP and PvE issues in itself, and the gameplay design around the in-game itself, is its whole own topic and video that would need to be made and discussed. So this is a long video of rambling and ranting, but it's also a video that needs to be made. And I know there's going to be Dune fanboys that say, hey, I'm dooming and glooming and, you know, it's not that big of a deal. But this is a big of a deal. If we don't make a stink about it, if we don't make noise about it, they're just going to continue to do the same shit because they don't get any consequences. The moment you start to have problems with anything, you raise it and you make noise because that is the only way it gets addressed. If it doesn't go addressed, they can keep milking it and playing by the same rules. And we don't want people to do that. We want to hold a company accountable for their mistakes and their actions. So with that said, I recommend, if you're not feeling the game anymore, changing your Steam review with your honest opinions on how you currently feel, especially about the end game. And you don't need to defend it. Truly, I love the game, but I will not defend it in its current state, in its current development. I will see you guys in the next video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Peace.